Добрый день.
Good afternoon, esteemed colleagues and guests. Today is June 23, 2021, 2 p.m. Moscow time. Let the meeting of the Dissertation Council for the defense of the dissertation thesis of Kiseleva Liudmila Sergeyevna for the degree of Doctor of Sociology in the scientific specialty 220004, Social Structure, Institutions and Processes, on the topic The Wellbeing of the Russian Population, Architectonics, Subjective Perception and Regional Regionality, consider open. According to the order of the Academic Secretary of St. Petersburg State University, Ignatov Alexander Valentinovich, from the 15th of March 2015, I, Devrigin Pavel Petrovich, Doctor of Sociology, Professor of the Department of Applied and Industrial Sociology of St. Petersburg State University, was appointed Chairman of the Dissertation Council. The same order approved the members of the Dissertation Council. Let me introduce them. Ivanov Sergei Anatolyevich, Doctor of Economics, Head of Laboratory for the Study of Socioeconomic and Political Processes of Modern Society, St. Petersburg State University. In the remote access mode, we have Grigorieva Irina Andreeva, Doctor of Sociology, Professor of the Department of Theory and Practice of Social Work, St. Petersburg State University. Can you hear and see us? Thank you. Margulan Jacob Aronovich, Doctor of Sociology, Professor of the Department of Sociology and Personnel Management at St. Petersburg State Economic University. Can you see and hear us? The answer is positive. Chebelkova Inna, Doctor of Philosophy, Charles University, Czech Republic. Can you see and hear us? Yes, the answer is positive. The applicant is also present with us, Kiseleva Liudmila Sergeyevna. The scientific advisor, Kozlovsky Vladimir Vyacheslamovich, is also present. Doctor of Philosophy, Professor, Head of the Department of Sociology of Cultural Communication of St. Petersburg State University. In order to improve the quality of communication, I ask you, dear colleagues, who are in the remote access mode, to turn off your microphones. But please do not forget to turn them on when it's necessary for you to take the floor. I would also like to say that we have the audio and visual broadcast. Simultaneous interpreting is being carried out. On the screen of the live broadcast of the Dissertation Council meeting, you can see the email address where during the meeting all those listening to the broadcast might send question to the applicant or express their opinion linked to the content of the thesis or the presentation. Thus, take part in the discussion. The questions will be sent to me and I will voice them during the discussion. The questions should be related to the presentation of the applicant and the content of the thesis. The author of the question should specify the name and position. The questions are not related to the scientific discussion, to the thesis, and to the presentation will not be voiced. According to the procedure of awarding the academic degree of Candidate of Sciences, academic degree of Doctor of Sciences in Petersburg State University, approved by local regulations, hereinafter the procedure. A meeting of the Dissertation Council is considered competent if at least 2/3 of the approved composition takes part in its work, not less than 4 people. Our dissertation board consists of 5 people, or 5 are present including the 3 members in the remote access mode. We have audiovisual contact with everyone, thus there is a quorum. I ask the employee of the Department for support of the activities of the Station Council, curator of the defense, issue a turnout list. I establish the following rules of procedure for today's meeting of the Dissertation Council with a total duration of approximately 3 hours. First, brief information of the chairman about the applicant and the documents submitted by the applicant for scientific degree and their compliance with the established requirements. Answers to possible questions. No more than 5 minutes. Short presentation of the applicant for scientific degree, reflecting the main provisions of the research. About 15 minutes. Questions to the applicant related to the presentation. No more than 2 minutes per question. Responses, no more than 5 minutes for all the questions. Reviews of all the members of the Dissertation Council and rota. With the assessment of the thesis and the presentation of the applicant, also with questions and suggestions according to the thesis. About 10 minutes per speaker. 6. Speech by the chairman with the assessment of the thesis. About 10 minutes. 7. Replies of the applicant to the questions and comments of the members of the Dissertation Council. No more than 20 minutes. 8. Open discussion. Speeches at the request of those present at the defense, with a summary of their positions or specific questions and proposal for the dissertation for the thesis, strictly on the topic of the research. No more than 2 minutes for everyone. In this case, we ask everyone to sign in the registration sheet and introduce themselves prior to taking the floor. 9. Presentation by the chairman of question addressed to the applicant, received during the discussion, during the live broadcast of the meeting of the Dissertation Council on St. Petersburg State University website. I'd like to draw attention to the fact that a written question, the announcement of which takes more than 2 minutes, will not be voiced. 10. Applicant's answers, no more than 2 minutes per question. 11. Speech by scientific consultant of the applicant. Scientific advisor, no more than 3 minutes, that is. 12. Discussion by the members of the Dissertation Council before the open roll call of the results of the defense, during which the sound of the broadcast is muted. About 5 minutes. 13. Open roll call. Counting of votes by the chairman of the Dissertation Council with subsequent entry of the results into the minutes of the meeting. 14. Making decision whether or not to award an academic degree. 15. Concluding remarks of the applicant, no more than 2 minutes. Dear colleagues, are there any questions or objections to this procedure?
Уважаемые коллеги, есть ли возражения? Если нет, подтвердите.
No objections. Since there are no objections, I'll proceed with implementations of the procedure. First of all, I'd like to ask you to mute your phones. Those who are in the remote access mode, I would ask you not to turn off your phones in case of technical necessity. So we are starting the meeting. The first point of the procedure is the chairman's brief report. The thesis by Kiseleva Liudmila Sergeyevna for the degree of Doctor of Sociology, and on Major 220004, Social Structure, Social Institutions and Processes, on the topic the well-being of the Russian population, architectonic, subjective perception and regional distinctness, was taken for defense of the order of the Academic Secretary on the 2nd of March 2021 order number 1463/1. Kiseleva Liudmila wrote her thesis on the basis of St. Petersburgskaya University. Scientific advisor is Doctor of Philosophy, Professor, Head of the Department of Sociology, Culture and Communication, St. Petersburg State University, Kozlovsky Vladimir Vyacheslavovic. The number of publication of the applicant, which set out the basic scientific results of the thesis, are 52 works in peer-reviewed scientific journals from the list approved by the Ministry of the Education of the Russian Federation, 15 publications. In publication indexed by sonometric basis, Web of Science Scopus, 4 publications, 2 monographs and 6 chapters in collective monographs. The applicant submitted to the Academic Secretary of St. Petersburg State University a complete package of documents for the defense. All documents correspond to Clause 12 of Section 3 of the procedure. All the documents submitted by the applicant, according to the received information, meet the requirements and are stored in the applicant certification file. Their copies are obtained by the employees of the Department of Support of the Station Council, who is now present in the meeting. Before giving the floor to the applicant, I have a question to the members of the Station Council. Dear members of the Dissertation Council, do you have any general questions to the applicant? Specifically, is there a need to voice the entire list of documents submitted by the applicant for defense? No, there is no such need.
Нет. Спасибо. Вопросов нет. Тогда переходим к заслушиванию доклада. Итак.
Then we move on to the brief presentation of the applicant. Liudmila Sergeyevna, the floor is yours. Dear Chairman and members of the Dissertation Council, all people present in this room and present in the remote access mode, I would like to present my thesis on the topic well-being of Russian people, architectonics, subjective perception, and regional distinctness. The problem of the well-being of the Russian people is of crucial importance. It has become one of the key problems of everyday life. The tasks which I find of crucial importance are the conceptualization of the phenomenon of well-being and the pursuit of well-being of the population. The subject of the research is a process of independence of objective indicators of subjective perceptions. The object of the study is the population, social group, regional and territorial communities. The purpose of this study is to develop a sociological concept of the well-being of the Russian population. Based on the analysis of a number of sociological theories and concepts of well-being, the multidimensionality of this phenomenon has been mentioned. In order to analyze the concept of well-being in various spheres, we use abstract logical, typological, categorical analysis. The empirical data was processed using the SPSS statistics software and neural networks. The information base of the study was made up of the surveys that were conducted during the period from 2009 till 2019 and included 4 stages of studies of satisfaction with life and happiness of the population through region, study of perception of happiness with children, study of perception of the relationship of health and the environment. The main hypothesis of the study is that the value of well-being by various groups of the Russian population is mainly determined by the conditions and resources for development at the regional level. The main results of the thesis research are formulated in a number of provisions. At present, there are several directions that describe the content and mechanism of well-being. From our point of view, the most appropriate conceptualization of the phenomenon of well-being is a concept of balance between the personal resources and the challenges faced. Based on this concept, we have formulated the definition of well-being as following: the presence of resources of the individual, group, society as such, that provide confidence in the present day and potential to remain stable in the near and distant future. The determinants and factors of well-being, dominant factors and domains of well-being, act as attributes of well-being. On the basis of facet classification, we managed to systematize more than 50 types of well-being into 50 facets and to conduct a deep comprehensive analysis of a category of well-being. As a result, a holistic concept of sociology of well-being was created as an independent branch of sociology with accompanying author-terminological apparatus that characterizes this sphere and applied tools for assessing and measuring the well-being of the Russian population. Many indicators of the well-being on the international Russian level lead to this personal indicator of well-being for a variety of trajectories. The analysis of existing international and Russian indicators of well-being, we have come to the conclusion helped us to come to the conclusion that international indicators can be grouped into 5 units. Russian indicators, among which more than 30 different methods, indicators, and indices can be analyzed, represent a vast array of information which is extremely difficult to systematize. Based on the carried research and international Russian experience in measuring well-being, we have identified the domains of well-being of the Russian population: economic, social, ecological, economic, social, and health. In our study, the factors of well-being of the Russian population were identified and characterized. By means of factor analysis, we have established that in 2 main regions, the factors of population well-being are medical and technological, so the connection between assessment of the health of people, feeling tired and weakness, complaints about work-related chronic illnesses, and feelings of well-being in connection with work. Ecological demonstrates that if a person is not satisfied with the work-rest ratio, ecology, safety, observance of civil rights, the less prosperous the person feels. Religious factor. There is a positive relationship between the faith in God and well-being. Felicity, hygienical. This is an internal configuration of the components. The factor testifies that happiness and life satisfaction depend on the state of health, on which, however, the low standard of living might affect. Economic level and income level is significant. And passively logical means the respondents have a passive position to the preservation of their health. The picture of factors of well-being population in Yamal-Nenets autonomous region is similar to the two-man situation. Socio-biological factor implies that well-being is related to a stable job and relationship, and assessment of health status as such which does not require the help of doctors. State protectionist means the respondent expects systematic actions in the field of healthcare from the state, believe that health is negatively affected by the instability of economic life, express the desire for the employee to invest in the health. Psychological indicates low self-esteem, includes the component lack of time to take care of health. In St. Petersburg, a large number of factors influence the well-being of the population, and new factors were found out. Sociological, it is extremely important for the population to understand that there is the absence of illness, but also the absence of symptoms that might lead to an illness. State strategic indicates that the respondents stated that the health of the population is negatively affected by the lack of clear future in the country, and the state is to blame for the negative state of health. Consequently, the state programs, in order to ensure the well-being of the population, should provide not only measures to preserve the health population, but also indicate the strategic guidelines for the development of the country and society in the long term. Felicity factor. Respondents consider the well-being of the family, good health, and happiness to be the guarantee of well-being. The comparisons of the factors of well-being for the population of Russian regions demonstrated the presence of dominant or universal factors, including economic, socio-biological, ecological, philosophical, medical, and technological. There are regional differences, both in the number of factors and in the essential content of the factors. These slides show specific regional factors. This list is more comprehensive than that of universal factors. Based on the data obtained as a result of surveys, with the help of neural networks, we were able to single out the groups of respondents who gave similar answers to the question of life satisfaction and accordingly assessing this parameter in a similar way. The slide shows groups of respondents who rate life satisfaction at the maximum and minimal levels. There is a specificity of population of groups fully satisfied with life. In two men, these women with secondary or higher education regardless of their employment. In terms of employment, specialist income, the average age under 25, marital status single. In Selichard, respondents of both sexes with higher education, employed in industry, high income, age 36-54, married. In St. Petersburg, respondents of both sexes with a secondary education, married status married, age any. And they said they're happy at the moment. The factor of happiness indicator calculated using neural networks to demonstrate the consistency of the determinants of happiness among male and female respondents. Based on the analysis of the indicator happiness, it was possible to create portraits of happy residents of Russian Federation. In two men, a happy Russian is a young man from 18 to 35 years old, satisfied with life, who defines happiness as well-being in the family, putting family relations first, despite the fact that at the present time might not be satisfied with her income, environment, and the work-rest ratio. In Selichard, the portrait of happy residents is practically the same as in two men. The non-happy people in Yamal are mostly women with secondary education, married or divorced. Happiness for them lies in material wealth, and the same factor is ranked high as the most important for life satisfaction. In St. Petersburg, it was a very difficult task to identify the predictors of happiness or unhappiness, since the portrait is blurred. In particular, happiness correlates mostly with the parameter of life satisfaction, where respondents who rated life satisfaction at 10, 9, 8 to 7 points indicate that they are happy. Gender, education, income, employment, age, there are no special features. Happiness understood as the well-being in the family, and they value their health highly. We might argue that two parameters, life satisfaction and happiness, are reliable indicators of the state of well-being of the Russian population. We were able to establish that in any surveyed population, regardless of the region, 4% of the population will be satisfied with life by 9-10 points. Approximately 20% of the population will rate life satisfaction at 8 and 7 points. And mixed and low assessments of life satisfaction will show from more than a third to just over half of the population. We found that respondents who are satisfied with life report being happy, but at the same time, those who are not happy at the moment report low ratings of life satisfaction. In each region with similar portraits satisfied with life, there are characteristics and distinctive traits. We ask respondents to choose from among 7 aspects, up to 3, which they are mostly dissatisfied with. The aspects the respondents are not satisfied with are income, housing conditions, ecology, and work-rest ratio. Approximately the same picture is observed in different age groups, with the only difference that older people call safety among the unsatisfactory aspects of life. The implementation of the population well-being programs in Russian regions depends on the selected strategic approaches and priorities identified in the Strategy of Social Economic Development. Studying strategies of the socio-economic development of the regions until 2013-35 allowed us, on the basis of identified strategic priorities, to diagnose approach according to which the strategy might be formed. In Tumen region, the dynamic vision approach is used. In St. Petersburg, strategic vision approach is used, alongside with the approach of strategic intentions. In Yamal and its autonomous region, approach of strategic intentions. From our point of view, the placement of accents in determining the strategic priorities of the development of the region, accordingly the development of measures to ensure the well-being of the population, can be carried out within the framework of the model strategic architecture of the social-oriented well-being of the population of the region. The model is based on the method of configurative modeling. The domain of the well-being are the strategic drivers of architecture. In the center of the model, there is a correlation between the functional model, which allows to calculate or to identify universal factors of well-being, and a reflexive model, which reflects factors of well-being, taking into account the regional specifications. The representative model makes it possible to highlight deviations according to certain factors, and subsequently reflect these deviations in strategic documents aimed at the development of the corresponding region. The scientific novelty of the thesis is as follows. The essence of the concept of well-being is revealed through the concept of balance between the human resources and the problems faced, the systematization of types and varieties of well-being, the basis of the facet classification. A holistic concept of sociology of well-being is substantiated as an independent branch of sociology, designed to investigate how people define and experience well-being. The term well-being, the domain of well-being, determinant and dominant of well-being are identified. The concept of well-being is theoretically substantiated. The fundamental features of the phenomenon of well-being are revealed. The importance of stability for the subjective perception, manifested in the presence of potential sufficient to maintain this position. Reveal the concentration of factors of well-being popular in four domains: economic, social, ecological, social, and health. Two groups of factors of well-being of the population, regional and universal, have been identified. The high importance of health was identified for the satisfaction with life and its perception in a positive way. The most negative factors influencing the well-being of the people of the Russian Federation are the type living standards, ecology, and low income. Developed tested methodology for predictive assessment of the well-being population neural network, which transformed data of a mixed nature according to the parameters life satisfaction and happiness, and allows to describe well-being for favorite social group. A model of strategic architecture of social oriented welfare of the region population has been developed. Thank you for your attention. We have heard the presentation by the applicant. Now, what can we do? We might discuss the presentation, ask questions, if you have any, and then we move on to the discussion of reviews. After the discussion of the presentation, we start giving the floor to the members of the Dissertation Council. Who has any questions based on the presentation? Please say if you have or you do not have any questions. I have a question. My question is the following. You've presented a work on sociology, but you have a very detailed approach to the problem of strategic planning, of economic strategic planning, so to say, since you introduced certain ideas in this sphere. And I'm related to that, this is why I can say such a thing. How do you think, what is the practical importance of your research? And what exactly the factors, determinants, dominants, what can be used to manage social development or to control social development of the region based on the results of your research? So which theoretical base and practical usage might be implemented? Well, I thank you very much for your question. I thank you very much for paying attention to the strategic aspect that was disclosed in my research. I think the strategy theory and practical implementation of strategic theories hasn't been in the limelight recently. As for the applied strategic planning. I suppose that my work could help to provide such. The methodology of identifying factors, well-being at the regional level, and the model of strategic architecture, since this exactly model answers the question which well-being factors haven't been yet disclosed in the current strategy of social development in the region. And thus it provides with the opportunity to change the strategy and make it better. I have one more question. You know that we have the system of appraisal of efficiency of the regional authorities, of governors. We appraise the work of governors based on the system of indices that changes over time, transforms, and gets new information and loses some old information. When you were performing your works, which criteria did you use because of considering them expedient? Taking into account the fact that the category of well-being is universal in a way, and you've showed it in your speech. It might be quantitatively represented, statistically represented, and subjectively presented. Very often analyze different systems of indicators, and the indicator of happiness, which is a worldwide indicator. When we analyze these indicators, we can often see that the countries with not such a high living standards become the leaders. For example, Nicaragua was the leader within a couple of years, and people are the happiest ones. Thus, these results yield certain organizational issues might arise. Issues in the region and money transfers from the federal budget. How do you think, what would be expedient? We need to provide well-being of the citizens, and what can be included in the appraisal system and conduct monitoring to take part in taking the decisions necessary for the citizens of the region. Sergey Anatolyevich, thank you very much. And here I'd like to say that we need to think about the three aspects that respondents are mostly dissatisfied with. That was income, living standards, accommodation, or work-rest ratio. Well, these leading issues in the method of the efficiency appraisal of the work of a governor can be found through the average salary indices and the number of square meters of rented property. These methods of efficiency appraisal of state officials do not incorporate the issues related to health, and these are very important issues, and there is life expenditure and the issues related to work-job ratio. This aspect has such a negative perception on behalf of the population that it should be paid attention to. I can't say what is the correct indicator, but everything related to it is of crucial importance. Are there any more questions? I have a question. Professor Mangulan. Well, following this question, the second question voiced, when we talk about the level of happiness of population, on your thesis on page 118, and there is a constant increase. In the beginning of the 21st century, we can compare it to the information of the 90s. I understand what you're talking about, but later on, there is a paradox. In 2019, and the level is 86% of people being happy with their lives, despite the fact that there is a huge number of problems such as demographic, economic, social problems. How can you explain this phenomenon? Thank you very much for your question. Well, yes, I would like to say that this institute conducts a multi-year of research, and they monitor the level of happiness, and there was such index of 86% of happiness. In our thesis, we don't talk only about the factor and the index of happiness, and it wouldn't be correct to use only this factor when considering the well-being of the population, since this criteria characterizes the psychological state. Because of that, we introduced two parameters to evaluate the well-being of the population. Apart from the parameter of happiness, to take the parameter of life satisfaction, which is based on objective criteria that can be linked to objective criteria. Thus, using the method according to which we use only the index of happiness is not considered productive. Irina Andreevna, I can't see you. Can't see your screen. I'm here. If there are any more questions, we can listen to them, and if no, then we'll move to the presentations of the members of the Dissertation Council. Thank you very much. The next point of our procedure are the reviews of the members of the Dissertation Council. Since all the reviews have been published on St. Petersburg State University website, we could look at them and read them. I'd like you to offer not to read the reviews entirely, but to speak about the key parts of your reviews, and especially your remarks and comments. Are there any disagreements with this procedure? Great. Then we start with Irina Andreevna. The floor is yours. Do you remember that you can speak no more than 10 minutes? Thank you very much. So I'm not going to read the first part. Well, of course, we're talking about the thesis by Liudmila Kiseleva, Wellbeing of the Russian People, and the creation of the comprehensive model. Definitely, this is a relevant work, and there are many interesting innovations in it, and there are certain practical results which promote the possibility of using this concept in the official management bodies. The model of well-being are rather diverse, and different social groups perceive them differently. Nevertheless, there are certain universal characteristics that link these models and allow us to compare them, to understand what is the priority for the population. In the first chapter of the thesis, we can see the main theoretic results of the research, and the well-being and its different aspects are the object of study. Much attention is paid to the idea of well-being determinant, which form domains. Complex factors of well-being, take into account subjective and objective perception based on international and regional levels. This topic is well discussed in foreign literatures. In the second chapter, the author concentrates on the analysis of objective well-being in 3 regions of the Russian Federation, such as Tyumen, Yamal, and St. Petersburg. The report stated all the specific traits for each region. The third chapter, the strategy of providing well-being, is linked with the systematization of strategic managerial approach to providing well-being of the population in the Russian regions. The author talks about the personal view and social-based well-being idea as a special type of well-being, and which stands for the society aiming at future development, taking into account the dynamics of the modern technology of changes under the condition of globalization. I would like to say that the conclusions obtained as a result of the research paper are of considerable importance. What is very important is the comparison of the results with the results obtained by the author with the data provided by other institutions. I would like to stress that the novelty is linked to the comprehensive concept created by the author of social well-being as a branch of sociology. Might it be considered sociology of well-being or sociology of happiness will be seen in the course of time. But terminology apparatus is rather comprehensive, and it should be used in the sphere, which shows the continuity and the changes in the modern world. The importance of the research is rather high and corresponds to the university standards. Well, I'd like to talk about some of the comments. First, when talking about the models describing the content and the mechanism of well-being, the author doesn't pay enough attention to the concept of balance between the resources of the people and challenges faced, chosen as the basis for the formulation of the term well-being. It is not clear why exactly this particular concept is the most relevant to the modern theory and practice of well-being. Although modern social state constantly changes and is non-balanced. Is it possible to say that the list of factors of well-being offered by the author is universal and not only domineering at certain periods of history? It is well known till modern age, till the second part of the 19th century, the status factor with well-being, which was not mentioned by the author, meant more than the economic factor. Isn't this hypostatization of liberal approach to well-being? I would like to say that today at one of the meetings I heard the information that the health factor has become almost one of the key factors. The situation concerning healthcare puts aside the Marxist approach of priority of economics. And the third, the applicant states that the Russian criteria of well-being are an array of different data that are difficult to systematize, which is absolutely right. It's very difficult to compare the results. But if the author stated the cause for it and the options for unification, it would have been much better. Well, definitely the dissertation by Kiseleva, Liudmila Sergeyevna complies with all the requirements, and Kiseleva, Liudmila deserves being awarded the doctoral degree in sociology in major 220004, social structure, institutions and processes, and points 9 and 11 of the aforementioned procedure haven't been violated. Let's agree, colleagues. Maybe you will provide answer per colleague after each. Let's provide answers after the review of each member of the council. Then I will provide answer after each review. Then I will not voice the comments, only provide the answers. As for the concept of balance, the author's definition of well-being focuses on the availability of resources that make it possible to feel confident in the present day and in the present of potential to maintain a stable state in the near and distant future. The potential contains not only available resources, but also accumulated, not yet used reserves. This way, the reserves allow timely to neutralize the emerging changes and imbalances. As for the second remark about the list of factors being universal, the following can be said. The universality of the factors is indicated in relation to the Russian population and involves the use of these factors to characterize the well-being of various Russian regions. We believe that in different historical periods, the dominance of well-being can change, and they can undergo changes depending on the country, level of economic development of state, and other factors. The status factor is found in the research in the part where we talk about the parameters of satisfaction of life, and we can see the different estimations based on the profession and of the education. As for liberal approach, we can see that Russia is implemented the liberal approach to the politics. We can say that there is a liberal approach to politics and try to tell the state authorities about the vulnerabilities that exist in the society, as to get the negative scenario in the social. As for the comprehensive indicators of well-being, this is a recently young area of study and assessment of both objective, quantifiable indicators and subjective, qualitative assessments of people, formed at the junction of different economic, social, psychological and political theories. Due to so-called youth of the intertext itself, these indicators of well-being, there is no systematically carried out measurements according to unified methods. Methods are being supplemented. The institutes that carry out the appropriate measurements carried out irregularly. That's why it's very difficult to identify statistically confirmed patterns. We see the solution of this problem in the concentration of activities in the number of organizations authorized for such activity, which would not carry it out on a systematic basis, but would also track new initiatives to measure well-being in Russia. Thank you very much. Chebelkova Inna. Now the floor is yours. You have up to 10 minutes. Thank you very much. First of all, thank you very much for this opportunity to be the member of the Dissertation Council. I work in the Czech Republic. That's why I'm highly interested in the thesis from Russia. Not to take much of your time, I'd like to give the characterization of the work based on several criteria and then ask a couple of questions. First, the relevance of the topic and the scope of this research. This topic is definitely relevant, and this is an evergreen topic in Europe. There are so many papers based on this topic, and new works are being published. And we discuss this topic constantly because the life satisfaction and the level of happiness, as we say, is one of the factors stabilizing the community. And nowadays it's of crucial importance. Different sociological research includes the question, what is your level of happiness? What I liked about the research paper, the thesis has conceptualized part, conceptualization, where despite the fact that there are many different types of approaches to this issue, but the conceptualization which characterizes Russia and Russian regions is something new and is very important. What I liked most of all is that this conceptualization and then the main conclusions of the author are not based only on theory, but they include the data analysis. As for the data analysis, the author, for example, uses neural networks. As far as I know, this is a rather novel type of research, which I like very much and is not very often used. As for the novelty, there is a regional distinction and regional factor distinction. And these factors might differ between the regions of Russia and between Russia and Europe, for example. That's why it was very interesting to have a look how these factors are similar or not similar. And if the author supposes that it will be possible to continue this research, it will be interesting to have a look what's the difference between different regions and European countries. And maybe it will be possible to publish some works further on in European magazines. As for the content of the work and the structure of the work, well, the work is rather classical. There is introduction, a crude literature overview. The methods are well presented, included the results of the author's research, and the data assemblies provided by the author herself. The list of references and appendices. Well, the structure and the content correspond to the requirements of Karlov University in the Czech Republic and the requirements of St. Petersburg State University in Russia. I have two comments, two remarks. The first is, we have already mentioned the well-being models, they exist, and they have been discussed and foreign works, and the author knows that. That's why on pages 76, 78, the models of well-being are described. But it would be interesting to say that why among these models there is no other model which corresponds to the aims of the thesis. Why was it necessary to create a new model? And the second question, how the life strategies of the individuals are related to the strategies of the region development. Thus, what is the correlation? For example, the region is not developing but everybody's happy, or maybe everybody's working but the region is not happy, or the region is economically or socially developing and sees a positive future. Is there a connection between the strategic priorities of the regions and the factors of population well-being in the regions considered? Well, in the conclusion, I'd like to say that the doctoral thesis by Liudmila Sergeyevna Kiseleva meets all the requirements, and in my opinion, the applicant Kiseleva Liudmila Sergeyevna deserves being awarded the scientific degree of the Doctor of Sociology. Thank you. Thank you very much. First, I would like to comment on the first comment or remark. Why didn't I use any of the present models? Well, the models provided in the thesis, the model of strokes and flows, concept of multiple consistencies by Michaelis, the homeostatic models, and so on, meet the goals of determining the subjective well-being of an individual, describing the mechanism of well-being at the individual level. Well, our goal was to propose a model of well-being that would describe the mechanism of well-being at both the individual and collective levels. As for the strategies, we can say the following. Regional development strategies, of course, correlate with life strategies of individuals, since they contribute to the implementation of successful life strategies. At the same time, the results of factor analysis show the tendency of residents, for example, of Yamal and its autonomous region, to acquisition activity, which can be reflected in policy document, but apparently is not implemented, as a request from the behalf of the public still remains. That's all. Thank you. Thank you very much, Liudmila Sergeyevna. And we give the floor to Ivanov Sergey Anatolievich. Val Petrovich, thank you very much. Well, dear colleagues, I'd like to say that you can see my review published. I'd like to voice the general perception of the work and voice the remarks that I'd like to pay attention to. I'd like to say that this thesis is a fundamental work. Although it is related to sociological theory, it has a lot of interrelated topics which are crucial for other disciplines, for strategical planning and so on and so forth. Secondly, the thesis, unlike many other, even doctoral theses, this particular thesis has all the attributes of a research thesis of such type. First, development of terminological base. 2, definition of different categories. Well-being, new categories are created, dominance of well-being drivers. This is the result of theoretical search, and these are very important categories which might become the instrument used for managerial purposes, which is high importance. Secondly, the influence on the development of the theory of methodology. I always pay attention to this criteria when I review somebody's work, and this criteria is present. As for methodology of prognosis is present. Well-being of population author's approach is based on the comprehensive analysis of different theoretical approaches and concepts. The methodology of analysis has been already approved. Has been approved during 5 surveys in 3 regions. Well, there is a different number of polls in each region, but this methodological base of the thesis is important, and the doctoral studies is the work on methodology. Third, approval and clarification of methodology was conducted. During the polls, surveys in the regions, including St. Petersburg, Salikard, Tyumen, and others. Thanks to this check and approvals, it was possible to see the reasoning behind the theoretical base. It's very important to present it all in one thesis. As a person related to this strategy of socio-economic development of St. Petersburg until 1935, I can say that I'm absolutely sure that we need to get back to this type of work and have a look at the results of analysis and the instruments that today should form part of the theory of setting goals, which has practical and theoretical importance. And lastly, there are certain recommendations provided by the author. There is factual analysis, methodology of factual analysis, taking into account the provisions that are of importance, and the estimation of well-being based on different factors. And the groups of factors are systematized, and their content is full-fledged. Thus, we can say that the thesis corresponds to all the requirements by the order in St. Petersburg State University, and the thesis has all the necessary content of such a level, of the work of such level. There are certain remarks. Well, since it is a comprehensive work, there are certain comments related to it, but they are of no principal importance. I'd like to voice my comments. During the research, the author carried the analysis of evolution of social interpretation of the well-being of population. More than 20 pages in the research paper are dedicated to it, not only to the analysis, but to the systematization. And since this systematization, this analysis, pose part of the author's interpretation of the key categories, thus it would be expedient or advisable to present the results of this analysis into a tabular, a systematized form, since it could clearly demonstrate your position on the development of categories. The second remark is related to the strategies of socioeconomic development in the three regions studied, which allow the author to state that each region has its own exclusive configuration of management document. That is the document of strategic planning. Well, before they had different names, strategy or concept, but now it's called a strategy. However, it does not indicate which of the documents of strategic planning most successfully reflects the architectonics of imagining the implementation strategies for social economic development as a means to achieve the well-being of the population of the region. So since you use this category of well-being, it would be necessary to show, and I would find it extremely interesting to see in terms of St. Petersburg, what should be done in our country. I would like to say that the research paper is relevant, independent, and on the whole, the research thesis on the topic well-being of the Russian population, architectonics, subjective perception, and regional distinctness corresponds to the key requirements by the order of the 1st September, number 6801, on the procedure of awarding degrees in St. Petersburg State University. And the applicant Kiseleva Liudmila Sergeyevna is being awarded the scientific degree of Doctor of Sociology on major 2004, Social Structures, Institutions and Processes. the points 9 and 11 haven't been violated. Thank you very much.
Слово для ответа.
Liudmila Sergeyevna, the floor is yours. Thank you very much for your remarks concerning the way how to make the material more visually attractive, and we will give the analysis of the evolution of the sociological interpretation of the well-being of population in a more visual tabular form. As for the document, from our point of view, the most successful strategic document that comprehensively reflects the architecture of management of the implementation of the strategic goals in the region is the strategy of socio-economic development of the Tyumen Oblast region until 2030, in which the image of the desired future of the Tyumen region is formed with taking into account the role and the vector of the development of the region in the external environment, taking into account the implementation of the priorities of the Russian Federation, the Ural Federal District. The document takes into account 88 documents of strategic planning of the Russian Federation, is associated with investment strategy of the Tyumen region, and 16 regional programs in certain strategic areas. Thus, this document is not only a complex document, but it might be used as a reference, since it shows which other documents provide information about certain strategical goals. Are you satisfied with the answer? Yes, thank you. So we'll learn from the Tyumen experience then. Then I give the floor to Marianne. Dear Chairman, dear colleagues, dear Liudmila Sergeyevna, since I'm one of the speakers speaking in the end, I won't repeat the aspects mentioned by my colleagues. I'd like to talk only about the fundamental aspects. Irina Andreevna, you sometimes cannot be seen on the screen, because if you disappear from the screen, we need to announce the technical break. So we're not going to announce it now. I'm sorry. You can continue, please. Definitely the issue raised by Liudmila Sergeyevna is relevant, and its relevance is linked to the processes taking place in our society and the attention that is nowadays paid to the social problems linked to many different programs. And in this respect, the thesis has different layers. It has a strategic benchmark, as a way to implement social politics. It also is the link of certain criteria of the research and a number of ways and methods and technologies of solving social problems is provided. If we look at this thesis, I'd like to say that it is a very successful attempt of providing theoretical methodological grounds of the well-being of population as a distinct method, and the creation of the complex of sociological methods of estimating the well-being of Russian society. I would like to talk about the novelty and the scientific results of the dissertation. Well, firstly, It is the definition of well-being found in the thesis. Then the definition of the author's position. That's the consideration of the model and mechanism linked. That's the analysis of well-being domains linked to subjective and objective appraisal. That's approval of prognosis methods with the use of neural networks. And in here I agree with my colleagues, since this is a very interesting approach and which is important for Russia and other countries. And the creation of the model of architecture oriented on the social well-being of the region. And I would like to emphasize the regional aspect of the thesis. Since the idea of well-being is viewed not only in the general sense, but from the point of view of regions. So several regions, different socially, demographically, are viewed. The arguments are provided, are well grounded. If we talk about the comments, they are mostly related to recommendations how to work on this issue further and prolong the solutions of these problems. The first is that the thesis explains the facet method of well-being characterization, and the systematization of the proof of different points of view is provided. But systematization is not comprehensive. On page 13, we can see only local approach, social, spiritual, political, financial, and social well-being in accordance with the subject criterion. As for the second aspect, the second remark the well-being of Russia and regions can be viewed in different contexts. But I suppose that today, when we can see exponential increase in challenges of social risks and threats, today we need to view these challenges taking into account the implementation of social safety. In terms of overcoming the modern challenges. And I hope that Liudmila Sergeyevna will focus on this direction. There is a certain disproportion in the presentation of certain fragments of dissertation. Thus, in the beginning of the thesis, it is mentioned that the issue of well-being is a comprehensive problem, and the term apparatus, conceptual apparatus, has to be consistent with general ideas and borderline characteristics. And thus the logic of the text requires conducting such an analysis. There is such an analysis in the thesis, but it can be found only in the third chapter. Where we can see the intellect map in the third chapter, we can have the point of view by Ms. Malasheva that social state becomes digital in its essence. There is a characteristics of a new model of social state. It would be advisable for this new model to get certain characteristic traits, features. As for the domains of well-being, well, they are viewed in details, but at the same time, certain information is missing. I have already mentioned about the safety challenge, or the issue of culture in general, which is linked to well-being, or the issue of education, for example. And finally, when considering the model of the strategic architecture of socially oriented well-being of the population of the region, which was of great interest to me, I believe that special attention should be paid to the definition of directions and social technologies and mechanisms for the formation of the well-being of the populations of the regions within the framework of the social policy of the state. Thus, in general, I would like to say that the research paper by Kiseleva corresponds to the requirements by the order of St. Petersburg State University, and the applicant deserves being awarded the scientific degree of Doctor of Sociology. And the points 9 and 11 haven't been violated. Thank you for your attention. Thank you very much. Jacob Baranovich, thank you very much. As for the first remark, of the many available methods of classification and typology and sensitization, we use the faceted method because, in our point of view, only this method allowed us to organize over 50 types and varieties of well-being. The essence of facet system is that it allows you to select classification features irrespective of each other, independently of each other, and then add new facets or removed old ones. We agree with the remark that there might be errors in systematization and the evidence of attributing of certain types of well-being to the corresponding facets. However, this systematization makes it possible to further improve and supplement the classification created. As to the social security, we agree that the well-being of an individual depends on ensuring social security. In the research paper, not much attention was paid to the study of these challenges, social risks and threats affecting the lives of Russian citizens. But there is a significant number of publications on the topic of personal security. And you can find this information in the list of reference numbers 97, 99, 101, where you can find the aspects mentioned above, discussed in more details. As for the disproportionality of certain fragments of the thesis, due to versatility of the phenomenon of well-being, the composition of the work turned out not to be quite standard. In paragraph 1.1, the main task was to systematize the varieties of well-being, while the third final chapter was dedicated to holistic substantiation of sociology of well-being as an independent branch of sociology. The remark on digital model of the state. We do not propose a new type of classification of the social state as a new type of social state. But we note that under modern conditions, when assessing well-being, it's necessary to take into consideration new indicators of well-being, since digitalization is aimed at creating environment for improving of well-being and the quality of life, the level of awareness, digital literacy, and the accessibility to state services within the country and outside the country. Next remark related to security. We agree that security is a system-forming component of well-being of all categories of citizens, which can be seen on page 165. However, in the group of elderly respondents, the aspect of security was one of the three leading aspects. This is the factor with which the population is not satisfied with, only in the Yamal-Nenets autonomous region. As for the rest, it remained similarly the same. As for education, we couldn't include it into universal factors, since the factor analysis did not confirm its significance at 95% level. But as a determinant of well-being, education has proven its undeniable importance and showed the link between the higher levels of education and well-being. And this thesis and this idea could be found in the presentation on one of the slides. As for identifying the domains of well-being and considering the models of strategic architecture, we tried not to deviate from the content of the major 22004 and not to get into sociology or management sociology, since social technologies would take us into a different major. I'm very thankful to Jacob Aronovich for all the above mentioned remarks, and much might be improved in the thesis. Are you satisfied with the answers? Yes, thank you. Now my review. It's easier and more difficult at the same time to speak after all the colleagues. It's easier because the colleagues have already voiced the main ideas related to the research paper. But nevertheless, I would like to state my opinion on the following issues. Of crucial importance is the fact that this research paper is rather timely, since nowadays the situation with well-being, when certain regions face economic growth and there is progress, but at the same time people estimate their life as unsuccessful, not pertaining to well-being. And we see that the economic growth has taken place according to the governmental estimations, but people still say that the situation is negative and consider the situation in a very critical way as the situation deteriorating. Thus, this research is very timely. Since the second major advantage of the thesis, which has already been mentioned by my colleagues, is its scientific value. This thesis solves a theoretical problem, scientific problem. Substantial theoretic work has been conducted. Comparative analysis of different concepts was carried out. And on the basis of this concept, there was a system of the categories of notions was created, which are of interest for scientific communities. Definitions are provided. The vector of development of the well-being, number of indicators which can be used to estimate the well-being, which criteria and indices might be used. And this plays a crucial importance for the science. It's clear that based on such a thesis, a course might be created, and on the basis of such a thesis we can talk about the sociology of well-being. as a starting point of a more broad approach to this notion. The work is great, and its distinctive character is the following. Sociology is integrative. It encompasses different fields, and in this thesis we can see a good option to solve these issues. About 20 years ago, when social diagnostics of interpersonal relationship, the Council had a very specific approach to social interaction. Why? How is it linked to sociology? But nowadays, the world trend in sociology, we have the sociology of communication, and within the 20 years, sociology has moved towards these aspects. So when you determine the criteria through the perception of people, through the way they feel, is a step forward, and I think there will be more and more papers dedicated to that. Another distinctive feature of the work is the existence of methods which, with the help of empirical data, allows to estimate the well-being based on objective and subjective information. And the approach using neurological networks is rather novel, and this can give a lot of scientific material, not only for the theoretic research, but for practical research. Thus, it will be possible to take more adequate managerial decisions based on the theoretical ground based in this work. Another strong point of the thesis is the comprehensive analysis, complex, substantial analysis, and the author determines the concept of the sociology of well-being, which is fully fledged in the contextual level. The author provided the regional point of view on the issue, and this is of importance if we take Lukaveshin's Kamchatka, Magadan, Kaliningrad. The well-being is absolutely different, and the conceptual position voiced by the author might become a good methodological instrument to appraise and level off this situation in many regions of the Russian Federation. Thus, the dissertation or the thesis solves a very difficult scientific challenge. Well, I have certain remarks, but they are based on the point of view how this work might be developed.
Даже в названии выносит темы субъективное восприятие, так? И в конечном итоге субъективное восприятие отождествляется.
The well-being of the Russian population is clearly a sociological character thesis, and the well-being is a perception, which means that we need the author to represent what is well-being of a person, which is a type of individual. What is the well-being of a group? This is an integrative characteristic. It's not just a well-being of a personality. What is the well-being of the region and the well-being of the country? It would be expedient if these categories were methodologically defined and then create a good methodology. Otherwise, we will estimate the well-being of the country by using the well-being of each particular individual. Secondly, it would be more productive, although I understand that the applicant was restricted in time and because of the social implications, it would be interesting to conduct the study in different regions, in the east and the west, in the subsidized region, in the agricultural area and industrial area. I suppose that if Liudmila Sergeyevna is going to work on monography, we'll work on creating such work. Thus, we will get a polar approach to estimating well-being. I suppose that the coefficients of the foreign level and Russian level should be more diversified, and it could specify the results of the research, which could allow to, for example, efficiently appraise it in practical life. Then I suppose that the position on the satisfaction of life was not voiced in the thesis. Maybe it is better to clearly identify it. But the above-mentioned remarks are mostly the vector of the future work. These are not critical remarks which somehow decrease the results of the work. These are the perspectives of the development of work, of future work. And the dissertation complies with all the requirements, and I consider the applicant worthy of being awarded the scientific degree of Doctor of Sociology. Dear colleagues, much has been done in the work of your council. Liudmila will answer my remarks, and afterwards I would like to ask, do we have any questions received via the internet? So first, please answer my questions and give me the questions that we received via email. Thank you very much for your remarks. As for the first remark, we set the goal of such a definition of well-being, which in a condensed form would reflect the basis and the essential content of this phenomenon at various levels, both individual and collective. At the same time, recognize the validity of the remark that in part of it, which concerns the greater productivity of the definition, if it were developed specifically for each group. The potential has not only the resources, but also the reserves that haven't been used. And such an understanding of potential resources plus reserves show the awareness that today and the days in the future will be successful. Mostly, it is formed of reserves and resources of different nature, and we need to focus on the productivity of the definition if it was worked specifically for each group. The comment about the polar regions. I do agree that it would be interesting to compare the regions with different characteristics, but our logic was a little bit different. We chose the regions with the Russian Federation with significantly high indicators of socioeconomic development in comparison to other regions. Thus, we assumed that having found the factors of dissatisfaction in these regions, we, with a high degree of probability, can use them for other less developed regions. As for the methodology of constructing indicators of well-being, in the thesis we don't have detailed disclosure of the methodology of well-being indicators. Only in Russia there are more than 30 such indicators. Some methods are disappearing, some are being introduced, and the work on comparative analysis of methodology, from our point of view, is a separate and very interesting but extensive work, which we, within the framework of our dissertation research, could not conduct simply because of the volume. And finally, about life satisfaction. Life satisfaction, as it was highlighted in our study, page 264, is a difficult concept associated with subjective well-being. We have reviewed the approaches to the definition of the concept. It was stated that life satisfaction is currently an independent research area within which many scientists conduct interesting research. Thus, we used the existent definition of the life satisfaction. Thank you very much. I'm satisfied with your answers, and according to the procedure, I need to ask once again, is everybody satisfied with the answers provided by the applicant? Yes, I see that everybody is satisfied. Now it's time for the people present in the hall, but there is nobody to voice any remarks or questions due to COVID. And now the applicant will answer the questions that we received during your presentation via the broadcasting of the meeting. We have received 2 questions so far. They are related to the text of your thesis and your presentation. Should I voice the questions and you will answer the questions? All right, so I will voice the questions. The question is from Habibulina Violeta Maxulina, the candidate of biology, Master of Science work, unemployed. Because of the poor broadcast, I cannot hear my questions and my answers. That's why I ask them separately. The question is the following. It is clear that you have conducted the surveys based on the questionnaires on pre-COVID epoch, but you were writing your thesis in the COVID epoch. Still, you say that well-being is a number of resources of the person, saying that the paradigm depends on the person, and you don't take into account the influence of social macro factors related to the violence of state apparatus. It is evident that no matter what resources the citizens of Moscow and St. Petersburg had, they couldn't be saved from the epidemic situation. What is the basis of your divergence from social reality when analyzing it? Well, first of all, I'd like to say thank you very much for those viewing the broadcast in road access mode and formulates questions. The question is very interesting. It's been noted that the research was done in the pre-COVID era, so to say, and theses were provided for defense when we did not have all the COVID restrictions. In the future, of course, we will consider this situation and take into account all the factors that might change the life of the society as a whole in different social groups. As for the thesis about the violence of state apparatus and measures taken related to the pandemic, we consider them well-grounded due to the threat and the lack of scientific awareness about the dangers that we might be facing. And I consider that these measures will be systematized and analyzed. Some will be found redundant, others will be used in the future for the benefit of the health of the society. Well, I hope that you find my answer satisfactory. Thank you very much. There is one more question. It's not related to your topic, but if you find it expedient, you can answer. Have you conducted the research with the comparison of the laboratories of INGA, the High School of Economics, and other laboratories that study megagrants and publish a lot of projects? Well, it's not directly aimed at you, but did you conduct the research using the above-mentioned bodies? Well, since this data is published and is of interest, we viewed this data as secondary data, analyzed. They have been analyzed, of course, and Ingo Hart is cited in the research paper. Now, according to the procedure, we give the floor to the scientific advisor. Vladimir Vyacheslavovic, we give you the floor. Tell us about the effectiveness of the work of the applicant and how the work was conducted. Dear colleagues, distinguished chair, and the applicant, of course, I'd like to emphasize that this research paper is the result of many years of work, and today's correlations linked with pandemics exist. It is linked to the fact that there is a decrease in economics, and the perception of people of the well-being notion changes. But the product offered by the applicant and the dissertation on the doctoral degree Well-being of Russian Population, Architectonics, Subjective Perception, Regional Distinctness provides a comprehensive analysis of theoretical and conceptual ideas as well as practical ideas. What factors determine social well-being and economic well-being, or understanding of happiness? And the model and the concept provided by the applicant can be considered highly productive, scientific, and applicable for future work. And it has been applied in this particular research. As for the problems, the topical issue of modern politics has been touched, and the dynamics of well-being will influence the well-being of the political system, be it at the regional level or federal level. I believe that the problems discussed in the thesis and the opposition of objective and subjective or self-estimation of well-being by the population. Very often, the respondents said that life is so difficult, it's very difficult for us to live here. But if we ask other respondents about certain aspects, then they start agreeing with the questions. Yes, they would agree that life has become better, but it's not as good as it was expected. The applicant herself is diligent, talented, and this topic is multidisciplinary and volatile. And this is a polydisciplinary research where very important results were obtained, which might be of practical use. And from this point of view, this is the advantage of this thesis, both from scientific and intellectual point of view. And and I consider their results remarkable and the applicant worthy of being awarded the scientific degree of Doctor of Sociology. Thank you very much. Colleagues, would anybody from the members of the Dissertation Council have the floor once again? Then we end the discussion. According to the procedure, I have to ask the members of the Dissertation Council. Do the members of the Dissertation Council and the applicant have any objections, remarks, or questions about the procedure, including the remote access mode? I need to get answers from you that you have no remarks. No remarks. No remarks, no objections. We pass to the next point of the procedure. Now it is 3 p.m. 50 minutes. I'd like to ask all the members of the Dissertation Council, dear colleagues, prior to starting voting, we have the opportunity to call a break to discuss the results of the defense with muted sounds. Do we need that? Do we need to mute sound to discuss the results of the defense? No, there is no necessity, thank you. Since there is no need, then we'll continue the meeting and we'll move into the voting procedure. And the meaning of the idea of each member of the Dissertation Council is voiced personally and publicly. I ask the curator of the defense to provide me with a turnout list of the members of the Dissertation Council present at the meeting. So I have to sign the list, this sheet. I'm raising the question of awarding Kiseleva Liudmila Sergeyevna the scientific degree of Doctor of Sociology in the scientific major 220004, Social Structure, Social Institutions and Processes, on open roll call. I remind you that the decision of the Dissertation Council on the issue of awarding the academic degree is considered positive in more than half, but at least 3 members of the Dissertation Council who participated in the meeting voted for it, in accordance with clause 23 of the procedure. So, Irina Andreevna, your opinion, please. I'm sure that the applicant deserves being awarded the scientific degree. Sergey Anatolyevich Ivanov, your opinion, please. Yes, the applicant deserves being awarded the scientific degree. Margulen Yakovaronich, I support colleagues. Ina Chebelkova, I think that the applicant deserves being awarded. I, as the chairman of the board, Dragan Pavel Petrovich, consider that the applicant deserves being awarded the scientific degree of Doctor of Sociology. I declare that out of 5 members of the station voted for, 5 people against, no, abstained, no. Thus, the decision to award Liudmila Sergeyevna Kiseleva the scientific degree of Doctor of Sociology in the scientific major 2204, Social Structures, Social Institutions and Processes, was adopted. Congratulations. And the final word of the applicant, we give you the floor. Dear Chairman, dear members of the Dissertation Council, I would like to heartily thank you for all the work that you have conducted with my thesis, with working on the thesis, reading it. Thank you for all the remarks that you have voiced, and I will take all the remarks into consideration, and they will only improve my future research and my future work. I would voice deep gratitude to my scientific advisor who helped me with creating this work and took me to the defense. And he made a lot of effort to help me to systematize such vast amount of information. And I thank very much Vladimir Vyacheslavovic for it. Now it's time to congratulate our applicant. I'd like to congratulate the applicant for great work and a successful defense. Liudmila Sergeyevna, I'm very happy you wrote what it was long and you provided remarkable defense. Everything was positive, and I wish you that your experience and your knowledge be applicable in your future professional life. And I would also like to congratulate you, and I hope that in the future you will continue working and we'll see new developments from you. Thank you very much. I'd like to thank all the participants. I congratulate the applicant and I declare the meeting closed. I thank everybody for participation and I ask to turn off the live broadcast of the meeting.